Hello and welcome to Strange Stories. It's great to have you here. We are all about sharing stories of near-death experiences from around the world in the hopes of bringing some light and inspiration to your day. Our daily videos offer a glimpse into what lies beyond this life, and we believe that they can help us all appreciate the gift of life a little bit more. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to stay up to date on all of our latest videos. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue to grow. And to our returning viewers, welcome back. We're thrilled to have you with us again. So go ahead, grab a cozy blanket, get comfy, and join us for today's incredible near-death experience story. Story number 1. Kagoshima Immaculate Heart Women's College is located on a hill in Toso with a view of Kagoshima City. It is a boarding school where the students live in dormitories with a couple of nuns who keep an eye on them and 3 or 4 English-speaking women who teach English as a second language to the girls. That's why I was present. My dorm room was on the 5th floor in the southeast corner, so it had sliding glass doors on 2 sides. They gave me a stunning view of Kagoshima, the bay, and the Sakurajima volcano on the other side of the water. The west wall of the room was lined with closets and cabinets, while the north wall was solid with a single sliding door that led to the foyer and the bathroom. That bathroom was the catalyst for my near-death experience. The previous tenant was an Australian woman with long chestnut hair that she dyed with henna. The colors had permeated the bathtub's plastic, leaving an unsightly mess. When I first moved in, the nuns informed me that they intended to replace the tub and remodel the tiles over the winter break. I patiently waited until the end of the fall semester, grateful to them. After all of the students had gone home for the holidays, the nuns told me to pack my belongings and move into guest quarters in a small apartment on the 2nd floor of a house a few doors down from the dormitory. This little apartment was enormous in comparison to my dorm room, and I was perfectly content to stay there for as long as the remodeling required. The workers closed the sliding door and sealed it with duct tape to keep my dorm room as clean as possible. They then demolished the bathroom. They must have used an electric sander to remove the old grout and prepare the cement walls and floors for the new tiles, as the dust permeated my room through the sealed door. The winter holidays were nearly over by the time the work was finished, so the nuns asked me to return to my room the evening the workmen left. It was late and the winter days were short, so it was already dark when I climbed up the mountain and up the 5 flights of stairs to my room. When I removed the duct tape, I was showered with a fine particle rain. I slid open the door, coughing and waving the dust away. The entire room sparkled with a thin coat of powder in the darkness, with only a few beams from the area light penetrating the curtains. It was stunning. I had to make several trips back from the guest house to my dorm room, each trip requiring 8 flights of stairs up and 8 flights of stairs down, so I was exhausted by the time I finished. I was certainly not in the mood to clean the entire room. I'll do it tomorrow, I promised myself. I figured as long as I flipped the dust off the futon I was using as a mattress and put new sheets on it, I'd be fine. I was mistaken. I fell asleep and awoke staring down at my body resting on the futon. Surprisingly, this viewpoint did not strike me as concerning. I felt calm and peaceful. I was standing at the foot of the bed, which was oriented north-south, with the headboard facing north next to the door and my feet facing south against the curtains and the sliding door to the balcony. I had to walk through the futon and the bed it was resting on in order to get to where I was. A large circular gate of radiating bluish-white light opened almost instantly where the north wall and door had been only a moment before. A figure emerged from the gateway. His outline appeared masculine, but I couldn't make out any features due to the intense backlighting. He defied Newtonian physics by appearing to occupy the exact same space as they did, only I saw him and not them, standing at the head of my bed, completely unhindered by the headboard, bookcase, and door. He knelt down and rested his hands on my shoulders. I was immediately back in my body. Get up. Whereas before I could clearly see my room, the gate, and the outline of the figure, now I was aware that my eyes were swollen nearly completely shut. I could barely breathe, and all I wanted to do was sleep. I don't feel like getting up, I argued, despite my illness and confusion. The figure still had his hands on my shoulders and replied, "Get up or you'll die," in a firm but matter-of-fact tone. He flipped me out of the bed and I landed on my hands and knees in the middle of the room, about a foot or two away from the bed. I looked up, my swollen eyes barely open, and saw the figure silhouette perfectly. He hadn't shifted from his stance in front of the gate. Instead, he raised his hand, pointed to the sliding door on the south wall, and told me to step out onto the narrow balcony. I crawled up to the door on my hands and knees, as instructed. I had to reach up to open it, but I eventually got it open, crawling out onto the cool cement and leaning against the wall. The figure in the gateway stood there and watched until I was safely outside, then turned, walked back into the light, and vanished with it. I stayed on the balcony until the bell rang to wake the nuns, which was around 5 o'clock. I struggled to stand while waiting for them to stir for a few minutes. I used my phone on my desk to call the reception office at the dormitory. It took a while for one of the nuns to respond, and when she did, she didn't seem concerned that I wasn't feeling well due to the dust. "Wash the curtains," she replied. I knew there would be no help coming up, so I had to go down. I made it to the stairs, but I couldn't navigate them, so I sat down and took it one step at a time until I reached the bottom. Just a few more steps, and I was at the front door. Looking out the office window, I summoned the sisters. The expressions on their faces told me I must have looked as bad as I felt. They directed me to a chair in the office right away. One of them brewed me some green tea. The other person went upstairs. What exactly did she do? She took down the curtains and had them cleaned. That was the end of it. There's no ambulance. There's no doctor. There's no medication. I sat in the office, sipping my tea, until my breathing improved and my eyes opened slightly. Then I laboriously made my way back upstairs, opened the other sliding door for a cross breeze, and cleaned everything in the room slowly and gradually. It took several days for me to feel better, but I was grateful to be alive. I didn't tell anyone about what happened. I expected no one to believe me. They'd just dismiss it as a hallucination caused by the severe reaction to the dust. However, it felt more real and vivid to me than any other experience I've had in the real world. The incident occurred nearly 18 years ago, and the memory is as vivid today as it was then. Furthermore, I've never heard of a hallucination throwing someone out of bed. Story number 2. Things are much clearer to me now. I rarely talk about the night of my accident and what I went through because in the past, my college friends didn't understand and either denied it or called me crazy. I don't fear death because I know I'll be in a good and loving place. I used to believe that after death, you become one with the earth. Not so much any longer. It's much more than that. Now, I know our soul or spirit is still alive. I'm not sure what's on the other side of the tunnel I saw, but it's embracing, loving, and good. When I hear friends talk about the loss of a loved one or when I lose someone close to me, I'm filled with compassion, but I also assure them that their loved one is in a much better place. When I see accidents on the road or highway, I get a rush and my eyes swell up, but I know it was their time and they're in a better place. I'd been awake for more than 24 hours because I was studying for an exam, and the night before the exam, my friends and I decided to go to the local bar to relax. I became irritated with a friend and drove to my place of peace, which was about 30 miles down a 2-lane highway, a rest stop with open land, and the smell of the air was so refreshing and relaxing. I got about halfway there, but due to the alcohol and lack of sleep, I dozed off on the way. It happened to be in a long stretch of road with no bumps that could have woken me up. I remember dozing off and having no recollection of what was going on outside or with my car, but I do recall being in a tunnel of light. The light was so warm and welcoming. I noticed a dark figure in the tunnel's distance and smelled a familiar perfume. I immediately recognized her as my grandmother who had died in 2001. She explained to me in Spanish that it wasn't my time because I had a long life ahead of me, and that I needed to turn my wheel to the right as hard as I could and get out of the car as soon as possible. I awoke and did as she had instructed. If I hadn't, I would have collided with a tree at high speed. When my car came to a stop, The dry grass caught fire from a fire that had started in my engine. I only had seconds to think, or I would not have been able to get out of my car. I took my phone, leaving everything else inside to burn. I couldn't dial for help because I was in shock from what had happened, but I could redial the last person I called, who was a friend. It all happened so fast that I couldn't believe it. I was fortunate because if I had delayed any of the actions or panicked, I doubt I would be here today. A few of my university classmates told me it was my body shutting down and preparing to die, but it didn't explain how I saw and heard my grandmother or smelled her perfume. I had such a strong bond with my grandmother that the day before she was admitted to the hospital, I collapsed while walking my dog and felt so weak that I skipped school the next day. My parents came home from work one day and told me she was in the hospital and my brothers and I needed to go say our goodbyes. I couldn't say farewell. I remember telling her she was going to be fine and that I loved her. Because I was hoping that because she was so strong she'd be back to herself despite what the doctor had told us in the waiting room. That night, we went home. I couldn't sleep alone in my upstairs room, so I slept in the living room, closer to my brother's and parents' rooms. But I knew when she died because she came to see me and told me she was going to heaven, a better place where she wouldn't have to suffer any longer and would be fine. I stood up, went to my parents' room, and told them what had happened. A few minutes later, we received a phone call from my uncle informing us that she died. I'm not sure what's on the other side of the tunnel, but I'm sure it's beautiful. I know because my grandmother told me the night before she died, so I am prepared. Of course, I want to enjoy my life to the fullest, but when the time comes, I'll be ready.